First, BBC One's weekly look at what technology has in store for tomorrow's world.
Tonight, fine art and fake paintings. Is this lot £4 million worth of Turner, Gauguin, Monet? Or are these guys wasting their time? And speaking of being taken for a ride, ever fancied a ride on a 270-ton truck, normally attached to these? Well, Carmen's been out in that truck, and of course, we made sure that she had a puncture.
Yes, I should have known you had something to do with it. Talking about punctures, this device is for hammering in nails, big ones, and I'd like your help with it later.
Surely you nod your head and I'll hit it.
Looks like a beach ball, feels like a beach ball. But it isn't a beach ball. Any guesses? Well, look over here, inside. There's a weight at the bottom here attached to this blue motor. And when the motor runs, it drives the weight up and down a central rod. And the speed's controlled by a computer, which is attached to the end of this, which all makes the ball bounce and makes it the perfect go anywhere, have you guessed, wave machine, big enough to whip up to surf in even the biggest of pools. Unlike other wave machines, it doesn't need to be built in. You just pop it into the pool. They're simple, but they are cleverer than they seem, because the trick is getting the ball to bounce at exactly the right speed for the perfect wave pattern. And here it is in action. If it's too slow, nothing much happens. Too fast, and all the waves reflecting back off the side of the pool interfere with the waves coming from the ball. So the whole lot splashes around a lot. And because obviously pools come in all sorts of shapes and sizes, the ideal bouncing speed is different for each one, which is where the ball really displays the brain it's got inside it. When you first put it in the water, it bounces at different speeds and monitors how well it's making waves at each speed. Then when it's found the ideal bouncing speed for the particular pool, a sensor inside the ball makes sure it stays at that speed. Impressed? Well, if you can't make it to the seaside this summer, you could have a ball at home.
Yesterday, US Vice President Dan Quayle made an important announcement about greengrocery, opening the door to a whole host of new fruit and veg. At the moment, if a new variety is developed by a breeder of the traditional green-fingered persuasion, it can be sold with little testing. But if the developer happens to be a genetic engineer, it can't. These tomatoes growing in a British laboratory greenhouse have had a gene implanted to delay rotting. The regulations are so strict that they can't be let out of the greenhouse, never mind eaten. But soon, tomatoes like these will be freely available on supermarket shelves in the USA. Under new US guidelines, most genetically engineered plants will be treated exactly like those bred by any other means and won't need special labelling. Well, this has angered some consumer groups, but the American government says that the new technologies create tastier and more wholesome crops without additional risks. Over here, many scientists agree, but no decision on regulations will be taken until European guidelines have been prepared, and that's not likely to happen for some time. Until it does, Britain's super tomato must remain firmly locked up in its greenhouse.
If you're driving something that runs on these things, the last thing you want is a puncture. These tyres weigh 1.5 tonnes each and cost close to £30,000 for a full set. But just because they're big doesn't mean that they don't get damaged. They spend their lives in quarries and open-cast mines, hauling 250 tonnes of lorry and load.
Wow, this is incredible. It's huge. It's the biggest mine in Wales. It covers about a mile square. That's about 430 hectares. And this pit is about 150 metres deep. Here are those tyres supporting one of the biggest vehicles in Britain. I'll just go up to the cab. Wow. The driver's called Jim. It's a beast of a machine. Hi, Jim.
Hello.
So just how many times a day do you have to run up and down this road?
Oh, it's endless. It's the only time we, you come to a stop is when we have a breakdown or a puncture.
And I bet that can really slow you down.
Yes, it will stop us altogether then.
Well, I know a quick way of getting those tyres back on the road.
Oh, I'd like to see that.
Well, this is it. Inside here is a laser which is going to help change this giant tyre by guiding this remote control crane. It's automating a slow and dangerous job. The laser's used to line up the crane with the centre of the wheel. Detectors attached to the side tell the driver how accurately he's backing it up. It means a lone driver can position it to within just a couple of millimetres. Once it's parked, the only preparation left is to remove the bolts holding the wheel on and steady the crane on its hydraulic legs. Right, well now all that's done, the crane is operated completely by remote control. Well, this is good fun, but I'm not actually going to change a wheel. I think I'll leave it to the experts. Here you go, John. Normally for a tyre change, you'd have to use hooks and chains to winch the wheel off. It could put a truck out of action for up to 10 hours. With the remote control gripper, it's a lot quicker and safer. Well, 4 tons of wheel removed in just under an hour. Pretty impressive, eh? Just enough time to get it back on before tea break.
Today, scientists in Hamburg are trying to create their own Big Bangs. The ground beneath Hamburg is riddled with a network of underground tunnels designed to accelerate particles almost to the speed of light. The newest ring, called Hera, is 4 miles round, and in it, for the first time, scientists are trying to collide electrons and protons head-on. In an atom, the electrons whiz around the protons, maintaining a respectable distance. But by dismantling atoms and then smashing the protons and electrons together in the tunnel, conditions are created which only ever existed less than 1 billionth of a second after the birth of our universe. They create their own mini Big Bangs. In this way, they might be able to confirm or disprove some of the many theories about the creation of our universe. During the collisions, an electron will penetrate a proton and destroy it, throwing out proton shrapnel. Measuring the debris of these collisions will reveal in detail what's inside a proton. The particles collide inside gigantic 3,000-ton detectors. And this is one small part of the huge detector, a spare part, that is. A collision would send a shower of particles through it, and wires inside would sense each particle and register it as a track. Well, to give us an update on the latest news, we've got Professor Robin Marshall with us, who's part of the British team at Hera. So how are things going?
Well, we've had protons and electrons in the last few days together, and we're hoping for collisions between them tonight. But the really good news is that we now know that our detector is working so well. We have this picture here which shows a collision of a proton splattering into an atom of gas and producing all these disintegrations and the measured tracks that you see measured in our detector here.
But how does a proton produce so many particles?
Well, that's because the proton isn't a simple thing. We know that it's made up of 3 quarks and a lot of glue holding it together. And the quarks are rather special. They don't like to go out on their own. So whenever we try to knock one out of the proton in a collision here, it dresses up, picks up all its neighbours and appears as tracks like this in the outside world.
What would you really like to find from this proton debris?
Ah, well, now we suspect there might just be a bizarre leptoquark particle which is made up of an electron and a quark. And it would be fantastic if our detector could measure tracks coming from one of those. It would turn physics upside down.
Well, good luck with that, and thanks very much for coming to join us. Okay.
An original Monet, a scene of Chevigny in France. This is an authentic Turner, Windsor Castle from the Thames. And over here, a genuine Gauguin, a Tahitian girl said to be his lover. But how can I be sure they're authentic? For all I know, that could have been painted by Tina Turner. Well, if I haven't been framed, they're worth about £4 million. If I have, a few £1,000s tops. With so much money at stake, a potential buyer has to be sure of a painting's authenticity. To do this, the art world uses a variety of methods, dating the pigments in the paint, taking X-rays of the canvas, and taking photos under infrared light, which can penetrate deep into the painting, to look not at what's painted on the top, but at what, if anything, was on the canvas before. Sketches or drawings underneath what's visible can be vital in proving that a painting was painted by the original artist. Now, normally, when you use that technique, this is the sort of thing that you get, lots of individual photographs which you patch together to make up a sort of mosaic. But the problem is that the results are rather hard to follow because the sharp edges of the photos break up the detail of the lines underneath, so it's very difficult to see exactly what's going on. Well, the latest method goes a little bit further than that. It uses a video camera to do the looking, and the details go straight into a computer. Now, it looks at a small section of the painting at a time and adjusts each one to correct the imperfections and distortions caused by the camera lens. And then it assembles them into a picture inside the computer. And then it can print out deep details deep under the paint that have never been seen before. Well, I have to say, to my untutored eye, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So to interpret it, we have the inventor of the system, Dr. Nicholas Eastall. Welcome, Nicholas. Exactly what are we looking at there?
Right, this is actually detail from about here in the painting. You can see the chin of the girl. You can see her arm coming across here. But if we look a little closer, we can see some other lines which don't relate to that portrait.
Right.
A little clearer if we turn it round. There's lines coming up here and down here, like the roof of a house. There's another sort of lines around here, like a wheel.
Huh.
I've traced those just to make it as clear as possible. And you can see the gable end of a
Wow.
building, the roof and the wheel, but it's not an ordinary wheel. The spokes are in a different shape. It's probably a water wheel.
That's amazing.
So this seems to be, in fact, a mill.
Yeah, it ties in with work he was doing at the time as well, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Immediately before he went to Tahiti in the early 1890s, he was working in northern France in a place called Pont-Aven, and we know that there is actually a mill. There are photographs from the time which shows this type of building with this type of mill wheel.
So on the original then, what happened?
Right. If we go and look at this painting now, when he began, he would have had the painting this way round. He sketched the mill on a piece of paper which he then stuck to the panel. He took this panel with the sketch on out to Tahiti, apparently, where he preferred the local subjects
Is that why he changed his mind?
and must have changed his mind and painted the girl instead.
So this is an original Gauguin.
Probably so, yes.
Excellent, and what a fascinating story. That'll make one art collector a very happy man. Nicholas, thank you very much indeed. Well, now Kate reports from France on the latest recipe to use up surplus crops.
The French are justly proud of their cooking, and they're fiercely loyal to their farmers. You won't find them making hollandaise sauce with anything but French butter. But however much the French eat, France, like the rest of Europe, produces too much food. Paying common market farmers for food that no one wants to buy costs Europe billions every year. But now those subsidies are going to be cut, so French farmers are looking for ways to boost their incomes by finding non-food uses for their crops. And this is their latest target. It's rapeseed oil, not the most popular oil in the kitchen, but it could be turned into something that millions of French go to work on. Last year, France grew 700,000 hectares of rape, twice what we grew in Britain. After a few weeks of blazing yellow in May, the flowers turn to seed and the rape is harvested. When the seeds are crushed, you get a high-protein animal feed and the rape oil. Now, here's that new recipe for it. Pour 1 litre of rape oil into a large container and add 100 millilitres of pure methanol. Then stir the mixture vigorously and cook over a low heat for 2 hours. First, the byproduct is drained off, glycerol. What's left is a lighter oil called a diester, and that's all it takes to turn a cooking oil into a high-octane fuel. In the tank, 100% diester, a diesel substitute. And up front, an absolutely standard turbo diesel engine with absolutely no modifications. The diester does cost a bit more to produce than normal diesel, but the French government aren't going to tax it as heavily, so it'll sell for about the same price. It's being promoted as a green diesel. To prove it works as well as the real thing, the farmers have run a fleet of tankers and tractors on diester for over 1 million kilometres. Because there's less soot in the exhaust than with normal diesel, several French towns are experimenting with running their buses on diester. By next year, 3% of France's rape crop will be turned into green diesel. So, is this the fuel of the future? Well, it's not going to help petrol-driven cars at all, and it's only ever going to be able to run 1 in 20 diesels. But it could help clean the air in some towns. And, of course, it'll make the French farmers happy. They've found a new market for rape that doesn't add to the food mountain. Tropical forests. Mysterious encounters and tantalising adventures. But exotic locations do have their drawbacks. Mosquitoes and the threat of catching malaria. Despite more than 40 years of international efforts to control the mosquitoes that carry malaria, the disease is on the increase. Its most deadly form is now spreading rapidly across Africa and Southeast Asia. And one of the problems in controlling its spread is that as new pesticides are developed, mosquitoes become resistant. Well, the latest hope comes from small bacteria, part of a family called Bacillus thuringiensis, or BT. Now, BT became very popular with pest controllers when it was discovered that these blue rod-shaped bacteria here produce these pink crystals containing toxins which are poisonous to specific insects but harmless to everything else. So they're ideal natural pesticides. Now, these bacteria produce 4 different toxins, all fatal to mosquito larvae when they eat them. The crystals have been made into a pesticide, but this breaks down in water and quickly becomes ineffective. So researchers at the Pasteur Institute are working on an alternative. They've taken the bacterial genes which make the 4 toxins and transferred them into blue-green algae. When these are put back into lakes and rivers, they should become a constant source of pesticide. So is the problem solved? Well, it isn't quite, because there's still one big worry. The mosquito larvae could develop resistance to these toxins, just as they have to other pesticides. But so far, this has only happened with pesticides containing a single toxin. And in this case, the blue-green algae will be making all 4 toxins. So researchers predict the mosquitoes won't become resistant, at least not for about 20 years. And in the more immediate future, if you're about to go off to malaria territory, the advice coming from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine is to take along these nets treated with the insecticide permethrin, because they've proved far more effective at preventing nighttime bites than conventional nets. And of course, don't forget the earplugs.
If you suddenly find yourself lost, you probably wouldn't think of relying on the United States military to help you find your way, but there's a military technology that allows you to pinpoint your position anywhere on the world, in principle to within 15 metres. It uses signals from orbiting satellites, and it's called the Global Positioning System, or GPS. It cost $20 billion to set up, and the US Congress would only fork out the money if the Department of Defense made the system accessible to civilians as well.
10, and liftoff.
Well, this they agreed to, and now 17 GPS satellites have been launched, with the next one due to go up next month. The satellites form a ring around the Earth, and receivers like this can track them down. The system works when at least 3 satellites are in view. The receiver picks up a signal from each of them and calculates its distance from them, and where the ranges intersect is the point where you're at. Well, we've already shown various uses of GPS on Tomorrow's World, and each year the system is finding more and more widespread applications: ballooning, tracking lorries, surveying. And that's partly because the latest receivers have now got small enough to fit in the palm of your hand.
"20,000 kilometres up there, there are satellites telling me where I am down here. And if I enter in the coordinates of where I want to go, even though it's only a few kilometres away, it'll tell me which direction to walk and even when I'll get there." Pretty neat, but it isn't as accurate as it could be, not because of a design fault, but due to the agreement between the US Congress and Department of Defense. That agreement means that the US military can deliberately corrupt the data that's being sent to civilians. That's to make sure that enemies of the US don't receive accurate data. So only the US military can make full use of its true accuracy. Well, it's good enough to find something this obvious, but for some tasks it's essential that you get around the corrupting of the signal so that you can find your position more precisely. For that you need a fixed location, quite high up, and preferably near the coast. Then you can use a system called differential GPS. It works something like this. The lighthouse already knows exactly where it is. It picks up the position the satellites say it is and works out the difference. These are the errors at the moment from each of the satellites. There, that one's about 45 metres, and much of that error has been introduced deliberately. But the nice thing is that the lighthouse acts as a base station to transmit the constantly changing error figures to all other users, so they can correct their own GPS readings. Who'd want to use it? Well, it's actually been tested in airliners to help them land, where accuracy is especially important. And it's going to play an increasingly important role out at sea. The ship Patricia is owned by Trinity House. They're responsible for all the lighthouses around the coast of England and Wales, and all the shipping buoys that mark deep water channels and wrecks. Now, it's obviously important that these buoys are accurately positioned, so it's the job of the Patricia to go around and check that they're in the right place, and if they're not, then to move them.
Mr. Loughran, we've had a report that the South Bordsey buoy has been hit by a fishing vessel and is off station. Could you put in the coordinates, please?
Roger.
Now, for the first time, the Patricia will be able to use the differential GPS signal from the lighthouse to make sure that the positioning is as precise as possible.
The ship is there with the buoy alongside, and it should be there.
The buoy is stowed aboard, ready to be taken to its assigned position.
Hold to starboard.
The increasing availability of differential GPS is shifting the balance between the military and civilian users. It means the US military are losing their exclusive access to accurate positioning. It's peacetime, and the Patricia can use differential GPS with confidence. In times of war, however, the US military want to retain the right to jam the civilian signal completely. But as GPS becomes more and more crucial to civilian life, the US military may find they're not allowed to switch it off.
There, I'm masterpiece. I'll just swap it with that old thing over there, send it back, and nobody will notice the difference. And the original? Well, I suppose I could find a place for it over my mantelpiece next to the Spike Lee poster. Anyway, I better pack it away before the guards see it, because you know what they're like. They'll probably want to buy it. Now, anyway, this is ideal if you're in a hurry. Here we go. Whoa! It's air-driven. It works on any old nail, like this. And it does it in seconds. Here we go. Now, all you need to do is to just push on the nail head slightly and it starts the mechanism. There. So, the perfect take-anywhere power tool. Just the thing for the DIY specialist with an air compressor in the back garden. Well, I've got to send this off to the Royal Academy.
Howard, can I have a private word with you?
Yes.
Can you...
I think I'd better understand you a bit better on this one over here.
I wish you would understand. Right.
Scrambling system to prevent eavesdropping.
That's right, a device in Judith's radio scrambles her speech and one in mine then descrambles it. And it's one of 7 finalists selected this year in the Prince of Wales Award for Innovation.
Open. Now, they're all hoping that doors to commercial success will now open.
Open! Ah, you see, it only lets through those whose voices it recognises. There's another one over here. This is a new type of ozone-friendly aerosol. New catalyst here, which reduces toxic waste. And this is a safe-to-dispose-of hypodermic syringe, which is very neat. Just slide that in there. There.
Very useful. And when the gasman comes in the future, he may not be reading this sort of meter, but a far smaller one here, which has no moving parts.
And finally, a new liquid crystal screen for computers, or perhaps one day, TV. It has faster changing pictures, and there's a bonus, because if you disconnect it, well, the picture stays there.
Well, all of these have 2 years in which to prove themselves. But next week, we'll be looking at the progress of a batch of ideas that has had that time to find commercial success. So join us from Highgrove House, where His Royal Highness presents this year's winner with the 1992 Prince of Wales Award for Innovation. So see you then. Good night.